Yeah.
I'm gonna yap at you guys for like 5 to 7 minutes maximum. Okay. My name is Ethan. As you may recall, I helped co-create this pattern with Willow, and I'm chatting a little bit today about my research, which is, let me see where this diagram is. It's this viney looking leaf thing, but it's not a vine, it's a tree. So my research focuses on black tupelo, which is a native tree to eastern North America. It grows from eastern Texas over to Florida, up to southern Ontario, and also like Maine, Hudson Valley, New York, that area. And then there's also some disjunct populations down in the cloud forests of Mexico, which is pretty cool. But my research looks a lot at forests and plants, and specifically black tupelo, and how ranges for these plants are changing in response to climate change. So we know that we have native plants, we know that there are plants that have always been native to parts of the country, but our idea of native is constantly shifting, and more so now with climate change. And so we start to ask a question now of like, is a plant native, but also native to where and native to when? Understanding that this is a very dynamic term, and just because something grows here now means that does not necessarily mean that it'll grow here forever. And we're seeing that change a lot with other native plants, and things starting to shift their ranges, particularly over here in the eastern United States, latitudinally up north. And so black gum, which I'm talking blank right now, but I have some zines here that'll talk about it, that I'll hand out. Black gum is shifting its range farther north right now, and so my research looks a lot at the genetics involved with that. And so black gum grows all over the place. I have a twig from one of the trees in the Arboretum. The best way to describe black gum is that if you're looking at a tree and it looks like a tree, and it has a leaf that looks like a leaf, it's a black gum. If you're gonna ask a 5-year-old to draw a leaf, they're gonna draw a black gum leaf, because it is just a very normal looking leaf. But they're a really cool tree species. They are facultative, which means that they can grow, or they have the equal probability of occurring in a wetland versus a non-wetland environment. So you can find them up on rocky ridges, but you can also find them in swamps, which is pretty cool. And so I'm really interested in what genetically encodes the ability to grow all over the place for a tree like that. And then how can a tree that's growing all over the place, because you can grow everywhere, you should be able to grow everywhere then, is that reflected in restoration projects, and how are we sourcing a tree like that? When we think about climate change, we're thinking about increased aridification of the United States. We're thinking about more severe droughts like we're starting to see now, all of those sorts of things. And so if we're gonna grow a tree that can grow all over the place, do we want to be sourcing that from more rocky slopes where you would anticipate it's dealing with drought all the time a little bit, or from a swamp? And how are those resiliences genetically encoded into these trees? And so if we're gonna plant a tree, where do we want to source it from? That's the main spiel for my research. I look a lot at how these trees are related across their entire range. I'm still kind of figuring that out a bit. But a lot of leaf collections, and then we'll do some genetic analysis and all that sort of good stuff. But I also am doing a common garden project, and so that's where you take fruit from all across the range. So I won't go, I'll have people mail me fruit from eastern Texas all the way up into New York and Massachusetts. And then you grow all those trees out in the same place. And so one of those is going to be here at Blandy, and then another one of those is going to be up in the Hudson Valley in New York. And so you grow them all out under the same environment. You're essentially looking at a microscope about nature versus nurture. So how much are genetics influencing the success of these trees in different environments versus how much is the environment itself? We can see how they react, all those sorts of cool things. And then the last kind of puzzle piece for my work is being really interested in how cities facilitate this. So assisted migration is kind of like the key word for what I'm looking at, how we can facilitate the movement of plants in response to climate change, because they are moving, but there's this question of if they can keep up. And most of the time they can't. If they could, that'd be really great. I wouldn't really have a PhD then, but whatever. So they can. And so I'm interested in how humans can kind of facilitate this movement, realizing that we've done this time and time and again for a lot of invasive plants through the nursery trade. Arboretum botanical gardens are also great examples of this. They're really important conservation resources, but they can also oftentimes be gateways for really novel species introductions and stuff like that. But I'm thinking about cities specifically, and so this idea that you're seeing those tree species or plants in general shift their ranges farther north, and how can we kind of start to seed in these plants a little bit north of their predicted range or of their current native range, but enough where you're kind of setting that seed bank for success once the climate reaches that threshold, if that makes sense. So a good example with black gum is that they grow up to like mid-Hudson Valley right now, Massachusetts, but they started to plant them as street trees up in Montreal. And they can survive there because Montreal has urban heat island effect, and they're kind of in like this little bubble of heat, great, yay. But they can't really survive outside of the city yet because it's still too cold. You'll reach a point where, you know, a robin or another bird, birds love black gum, are gonna come by and eat a fruit, and they are gonna fly outside of the city and poop it out. And they're gonna keep doing that, and they're gonna keep pooping out their seeds, and then one day that seed is gonna germinate because the climate conditions are gonna be right. And so what are we doing in terms of planting our trees? What are we sourcing, and what are we then putting on our landscape? And then what are we putting back out on our landscape, if that makes sense? What are the genetics of the trees that those birds are then gonna crap out outside of the forest, or outside of the city in the forest? And what are the implications of that for restoration? How can we kind of make that the most successful or most proactive process? So how are we doing that right now? How can we do that in the future? And how is that reflected then with the genetics of like wild trees versus cultivated trees? So when we're cultivating a tree and we're planting out a black tupelo, is that more closely related to a tree in Alabama? And if a tree that's closely related to Alabama is being planted out in Montreal, is it gonna live? Probably not, but maybe we can push the range with Virginia or New York or something like that and still maintain genetic diversity. And so that's kind of what my research is looking at. I have a few zines that talk about black tupelo, and also native plants and this question of native to where, native to when. And some other quick fun facts about these guys is that they are foliar flagging species, so they change color around the same time that their fruits ripen to signify to migrating birds that they're ready to be eaten, which is really sweet. And they're cool. They grow all over the place, but they're never really a dominant tree in their range. But once they get pretty old, they start to have this really quirky bark, which is featured in one of the zines. Does anybody have any questions? It's okay if not. I just spewed a lot. Yeah, what's up, Mia?
What birds disperse the seeds of
So many. Cedar waxwings, pileated woodpeckers, catbirds, robins, all birds. A lot of birds, a lot of songbirds. Yeah. Cool. That was my spiel. Thanks.
Yay!
Also, some seeds, and here's a branch if you want to look at it. It's like a really nondescript looking tree. But it's cool. People have to study weird things, weird trees.
That's